Boy, magic is it's a tough gig. So get to do a book review this time. Not actually even a commissioned one. I did one for myself as like a palate cleanser between commissioned book reviews, because those also take me a while. But this was my listening to the audiobook, which is also why it was done relatively quickly. Existentially challenged. Yes. And so this is from Yahtzee Croshaw. It's actually a sequel to his a previous book in the same series called Differently Morphous, which I don't think I ever talked about. I did listen to. I mean, I like audiobooks in general, and he reads his audiobooks very well, which is not surprising. He's been doing, his own voice work for videos for freaking ever. So I didn't talk about that. And if I were to think back on it, I think the reason I probably didn't was because I was a little bit mixed in some of the specific aspects of what it was he was doing with that story, in a way that I wasn't sure what to think, but it also seemed like possibly stepping on a landmine. So, oh boy, I'm going to end up touching on it now because he handles it better here, at least to my view. So let's actually back up. Let's talk a little bit about the previous book so you know what the heck is going on here. In the previous book, it was centered around the, it's all set in the UK, the Ministry of Occult Activities or Ministry of the Occult, something like that. And where it's this secret organization within the government that tracks down people who are basically touched by eldritch horrors. They are in some way tied to these, what are called the Ancients, and they exhibit some form of magical power as a result. And most of them are taught to suppress it, because giving into it, first of all, it tends to result in a lot of damage. And second of all, it tends to mean that their body is given over to the Ancients, and the results are messy. And then there are very special people who get brought into the fold and become agents of the Ministry of Occult. And we sort of follow a new inductee into the Ministry of the Occult as they sort of take on a case and some stuff going on. And there's more to it than that, but that's the basics. And where things got a little bit iffy in the last one is there's a character who is serves as kind of a liaison, a little bit of a PR person for the various government entities, who, is very overly conscious in regards to, what come to be known as these sort of dual entities, someone who has that aspect of an ancient with them. And she's going on about, respecting their identity and their presentation, these other things. And it was, in that first book, it was handled in a way that made me a little uncomfortable in terms of feeling like it was mocking identity issues. And I feel a lot better about that aspect of it now that it's come up again in the second one, because that character specifically has been much more freely painted as she just takes everything she does so far. We get other perspectives from people who hold a similar overall position of, respecting and thinking that we shouldn't just be suppressing and or wiping these people out, but who aren't the shrill sort of overly conscious of what's the trending topic kind of view that the returning character is. So it helped balance it in a way that made it clearer to me what the overall narrative's perspective was, since it wasn't all funneled through this one character. So that I think, thinking back on it, was why I didn't talk about the last one, because I really wasn't sure how I felt about that particular aspect. But in here, it's handled better. And honestly, in general, when things blow up, when things get out of hand, because at this point, at the start of this book, the existence of magic and the Ancients and other planes and dimensions and beings and all this stuff, it's all been declassified now. People now know. And so the Ministry of the Occult has become a different department, and it's still the same people, but now it's their job to try and both, handle and educate these people, but also protect them and investigate false claims of magic. And so suddenly some of them are having to investigate things like fortune tellers who claim to have magic powers. And it blows up pretty big in a way that might not be too difficult to predict if you think about what kind of entities claim to have otherworldly influence that could theoretically be challenged in court under some badly written laws. And that's the other thing. Like, this is a world in which most of the people involved are going to do something stupid. Not everyone is inherently an idiot, but everyone is capable of doing something that makes the situation worse. And particularly in regards to this sort of this young girl who's being touted as a healer that our lead character goes to investigate, there's stuff that escalates that particular situation, and it's all really stupid. And it kind of just brings the point that, like, this stuff can escalate in the worst way just for the stupidest possible reasons. Not because everyone is stupid, but because everyone is capable of doing something stupid. So that's well built and well handled. The various characters, all the returning characters are good. There's the character of Dr. Diablerie, who is, wow, he's he is something else. This guy's permanently in a top hat and a cape, the most overblown, oh yes, I command the mystical forces. And he works for, for the agency, but like, they also don't know what the hell to make of him. And our lead character is basically just his handler, for lack of a better way to put it. And actually, the lead character, Allison, is really interesting because what Croshaw did with her was he gave her a skill that seems great, but he also took into consideration why that skill actually would kind of suck. So what she has is she has an eidetic memory, perfect recall. She remembers every detail and can recall it all exactly as she's basically a walking recorder. She knows the exact words that were said, the exact time of everything, the exact placement of things in her room. She remembers all of that. And that may sound like, oh, well, like, she's an investigator. Obviously, if she can remember every detail, she's got to be great at that. Well, not really, because part of the nature of having that is that she has a very hard time distinguishing what's an important detail and what isn't. Because for most of us, our brain filters that for us. The details we don't forget is stuff that our brain has decided, no, we don't need to think about that. So that we remember and we focus on the important things. Now, sometimes it turns out that a thing that you forgot was also important, but that's the nature of most of our memories. For her, because there isn't that automatic filtering of important from unimportant details by way of just forgetting certain things, it's actually really hard for her to parse what out of all the information my brain just took in actually mattered. So there's that. And then it gets pointed out by another character later that she has no imagination, which makes sense. What's the most basic nature of imagination that pretty much everybody has? It's filling in the gaps between the things that you do definitely remember and the things that you forgot. You use your imagination to just say, well, okay, I don't remember in exact detail exactly what was said or exactly where everything was, but I remember this and I remember this and I remember that, and I can fill in the rest. She doesn't have to fill in the rest. She remembers the rest. So she has no imagination. It's just it's one of the things that Croshaw does well. He did something similar with his Galaxy books, We'll Save the Galaxy for Food and We'll Destroy the Galaxy for Cash, where he really dug into the full potential implications and uses of what is effectively like Stargate style technology, and just really drilled further into it than you would normally expect and pulled out some interesting quirks of that. And he does a similar thing with Allison's eidetic memory. And this is overall a comedic piece, and it does build on the previous one. I don't think it'll be impossible to follow this without having read or listened to Differently Morphous first, but it does kind of assume that you have, and it is building very much on it. And while it will touch on the stuff that happened previously enough that we're like, maybe if it's been a while since you read or heard that one, it is giving you reminders, but it'll probably flow better if you deal with the first one. And it's a fun mix of characters who are all clashing in really interesting ways. You have the character of Victor, who has a very interesting time sort of establishing a nemesis, which that goes some interesting places. Allison gets, puts up with a lot. And while it is overall comedic in tone, there is some darkness here. There are some unsettling turns of events. People do die, and sometimes in very unpleasant ways. So while it is a comedy, more than anything else, it is a comedy set in a world that is dabbling in eldritch horror. So there is going to be some nastiness going on. Be aware of that if you're only looking for a good time. But if you're okay with that kind of setting, being a little lighter and being navigated by people who are making most situations worse and are kind of idiots sometimes, this was good. I had a lot of fun with this. Existentially Challenged. Have you heard it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and is how I'm able to do this as my living. Any amount that you can contribute there is of immense help. And even if you can't, like, share, subscribe, help me out as well. Don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. This video wouldn't have been possible without my supporters over on Patreon, and I would especially like to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Imudelki, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabe Lax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Tim Price, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, David Hall, General Contact Unit Problem Child, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. Thank you so much.